Hi, my name is Baxton Ochieng. I've trained in quantity surveying and graduated in the same course, and now I am teaching. I've been teaching quantity surveying as well through various platforms, handling various students via online and also physical sessions on a one-on-one basis, teaching quantity surveying and also construction at large. So welcome to this beginner series that is aiming towards coverage of the rules of the standard methods of measurements. So I would urge you that as we continue receiving this content, please subscribe to this channel. Well, now we are on. Today we'd like to cover a few areas including mechanical engineering installations. As you can remember the previous one, this is now section R of the standard methods of measurements. From the previous session that we had covered, that is Q, we were talking about plumbing and drainage installations. So this bit that we have reached at especially majorly deal with items to do with the services, which is also quite crucial in our estimation as quantity surveying is concerned. Now for the mechanical engineering installations, as usual, I always like to create a balance or strike a difference between what you would have known or what you might be missing, to bring it quite clearly so that the channel makes understanding easier for you. For this session, for the mechanical engineering installations, there are especially items that deal with you can talk about HV and AC. Now that is heating, ventilation and air conditioning generally, and of course there are other categories in which these items are concerned. And when you look at the items that are for the ones that are following in that given order, you can see, let me just make an highlight. Yeah, you can see the items, piped systems, which are making up mechanical engineering installation works. So they include those that have been listed there, okay, including ventilation, hydraulic installation, compressed air installation, compactors, incineration plant, and so on. So those are the items in which make up the mechanical engineering installations. So we move on and see what else is here. So especially now when you've talked about those items which are sophisticated and they are aid into sometimes regulation of the air temperature, that is now the air conditioning systems, they also associate with pipe work, which is also one of the items that are associated with them. So such items including the pipe work, then you have to note that the rule is now what guides you. If at all, normally in general you will find that these items are handled separately. They are handled by a different specialized personnel. But then should you get in hand or get hold of that document, you as a quantity surveyor are in a position to interrogate the items that are presented there. Are you able to understand the given prices that have been done? Of course, the specialists stand a better chance because that is now a specialized training in which he or she has done. But then you as a quantity surveyor, you need to have knowledge on how to interrogate such items, especially based on your experience, what you've learned, and also the general knowledge based on what the rule is telling you. So we talked about ductwork to do it in linear meters. So that is also still ductwork, and as we had done previously, items to do with the fittings, those ones are measured as extra over. Okay, of course you understand that, for instance, if you are installing an outdoor AC, outdoor air conditioning unit, then you need to also have some pipework that is leading you from the outside or the external of the house into the inside. So that given pipe work, you measure it the same way, and then now there are other extra over items that are concerned in regard to the fittings in which that given pipe work is associated with. So that is how that happens. Then we have hoods generally for the kitchen, just to extract that heat and the smoke to the outside of the house. So in that case, you also need to handle that separately, and then you have to deal with it in terms of numbers. So just general examples of these are mechanical items. You have diffusers, grills, attenuators, dampers, filters, lifts, hoists, cranes, etc. So these are generally equipment under the mechanical mechanical items. Okay, so in this case, these items that we've listed here, they have generally how they are done. So equipment generally they are done in numbers, they are enumerated. So you count how many diffusers do you have, how many grills do you have, and so on. So once you've ascertained the number of those items which you have, then basically that is what should be appearing in your BQ. So in any case, you as a quantity surveyor, you get to see the bills of quantity for the mechanical works. Then you see a different unit, then you are in a better position to understand that is not actually what is supposed to be done. Okay, because the rule is similar, and then it's the main reference in which you are pegging your bills of quantities on. Okay, that is lift. Also, we talked about generally you do them in numbers, as we've just said. So moving to the BQ, as we've always done, we always have that relation between what the rule is saying and a typical an example, which is for now generally just covers the showing you what has been done. But then now, as we go on, which I believe in the next 2 or 3 sessions we should be there, we are now going to start now the actual measurements and estimation of these items which we've covered from the rule. So it will become clearer for you to even understand deeper in terms of how those rules are applicable and how they are used. But then so it's important that we understand the rules quite clearly, so that when we now go into carrying out the actual measurements, then it's easier for us to understand what the rule says and how it's now actually done, as it will be done when we get there. So in this case, the mechanical installations, they were just categorized together with the plumbing works and the drainage works. But then you've seen from the bills of quantities, they are given under different sections. Okay, so normally you can leave them as these are now called the prime cost sums. Okay, those sums which give you gives the amount of items that will be done by the specialist for the works. So in this case, just extract it from the person who had done it. If it was not done for items that are of a smaller scope, that you are able to estimate based on the rules that have been given there, then you are now in a better position to do so without a problem. So that is how that is appearing. So we move on. We move to the next item of today, and that item is the electrical and electronic installations. So these being services, they are items that generally you have interacted with them in one way or another. Okay, so the items that are common, and knowingly or unknowingly you've had these items. Okay, for example, switches, basically electricity, the thing to do with electricals. Okay, and electronic installations, we have lighting, heating. So generally these are just the categories which you can have in as much as electrical and electronic installation is concerned. We have power distribution, lighting, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, okay, and the list goes on and on. So the rule says that you can always group your electrical works into those items that are there, okay? Main switch gear, power distribution, lighting, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, telephones, bells, clocks, sound distribution, signals, fire alarms, okay, burglar alarms, earthing conductors, lightning conductors, that is. So that in mind, let's see now the specific rules which are now concerned with what we are working on in terms of the ultimate document of our bills of quantities. So we see, let's see what happens. So for example, now this is the equipment and the control gear. So we want to see how exactly do we go about in terms of the rule. So we've seen here that we have enumerated separately, stating the rated capacity, okay? So once you have the items that you've seen there, you can count them, maybe from the plan or from physically, but then you remember that the same case that applies for the other item, the last two sections we've covered, that is the plumbing and the drainage installations, and then the electrical and electronic installations. These are also items under the specialist works, okay, the electricians. So they are also better placed to work out on this part. But you, as the surveyors, I would mention, you need to be in a position to interrogate those specific works that have been done in a particular way or another by the specialist guy. Moving on, let's see what else we have under the same same section. Yeah, so from there we've talked about generally the items of under electricals. I'll show you also from the bills of quantities. They are done in numbers. So once you have that number, then you price, okay, based on the market prices, also based on the information that the electricians can give you on the market trends in terms of how those items are done at the moment. So the next is fitting and accessories, and from this bit the concept still remains the same, okay. For the lights, these are light fittings, okay. We also do them in numbers: boxes, conduit boxes, molded buttresses, break joint rings, sailing roses. So these are basically light fittings, and light fittings, they are done in numbers. That is what we are able to deduce from the rules that are provided here on how to handle them. Then finally, under electricals, we also need to cover the builder's work. I explained, and I would reiterate the same, that when you're talking about the builder's work, normally you will find that there is a main contractor doing the main structure or the builder's work, and then now there are the subcontractor or the specialist guys doing the other services. So there is always an allowance of some amount that facilitates that you, the subcontractor, doing the work within the main building. So in that case, you have give an allowance, okay. Builders work in connection with the electrical installations will be grouped together. For instance, creating holes in the within the slab or the walls of already the work that have been done by the main contractor or the builders, okay, the building contractor. So in that case, this is normally an allowance for you to facilitate that work, okay. So it's always given in terms of a sum in that case. So let's see from the bills of quantities if we have also the expression for the this was mechanical. This was mechanical. Then this is electrical works also under services. So it's also given as a sum. Okay. So that is how the services are done in terms of the rules which guide on how we measure such items. So that said, now we are in a better position to understand the two sections that we are meant to cover for now. So let's see what is coming next in terms of the rules of measurements. Well, the section that we are covering next is section T, concerning the floor, wall, and ceiling finishes. So we'll just like also to see which are the other rules that guide our measurements in regard to this section. So floor, wall, and ceiling finishes, generally these are items that they make up what you are able to see, as the name suggests. Okay, they just make sure that that intended aesthetic appearance of the house is achieved. So if it's the walling, we talk about items like plastering and painting. Okay, if it's the floor, we talk about screeding, tiling, and you can have a wide variety of finishes that you can adopt in floor finishes. So in that case, this is what it means by the finishes. So we want to see in situ finishings, those that are done in place. Okay, then normally you just describe as it shows. Okay, of course I'm going to show you from the bills of quantities how some of these items have been done. But then you talk about the kind as usual. You talk about thickness. For instance, you're saying about 30 millimeters thick for screeding and so on. So all those items you need to specify in terms of how they are done, and also the sizes, particular sizes of the items that are involved. So floors and pavings. So generally these items, you will notice that generally finishes. For instance, we'll talk about from the floor. Okay, so for the floor finishes, you have the screed that is now straight point on. You have the screed. You'll measure it in a square meter. So let's just see a typical example from the bills and see how. So looking into finishes, let's see what some of the items that we have. So for instance, our floor finishes. So here you describe the thickness. So here, for instance, we are saying 30 millimeters to entry porch, elevated passage, dining porch, and barbecue. So in that case, you've talked about the thickness just the way the rule is stipulating. You've mentioned the thickness of that given screed, and also to some extent you can mention when, especially when the rooms are divided, or they have different types of finishes, then you can always do your separation and mention that here and there. But then that is not it's not so much described in the rule that you have to identify the spaces, but then you have to identify the type of finishing that is done in a particular place or in a particular area. So we've talked about screeding. Of course, for the floor, we just want to finish with the floor first. We have screeding, so you describe the thickness, and you describe you can talk about the mix. For instance, you can say we have cement and sand of 1 to 4, beds and backings. So once you've identified that, you've also talked about the thickness, then you are good. So what next? What you do next is doing your quantity, which as you understand that we are going to, when you arrive there, we are going to do it so much elaborately to see how that is handled. Okay, so you describe the thicknesses, the type of material that you're putting in place, and then the main unit there is square meters. And of course, items like the skirtings, you do it in linear meters, as you can see from my bills of quantities. Okay, so you have that in various areas, and that is how it goes. So let's see also another section here. That is this is walls and ceilings. So we have staircases. So staircases, it's done in linear meters, as you can have might have well seen from my bills of quantities. Items like the risers, the treads, those ones you do in linear meters, but then you state the width of that specific item. So looking into, for instance, work to trends, this and this, stating the width. So what I've just highlighted is giving you what I've shown you from the bills of quantities. Staircases, the treads, the risers, edges of landings, and so on, and also the skirtings. Okay, generally those ones are done in linear meters, but then you have to remember to state the width of those particular items. Okay, so we've finished with the floor finishes. We've done the floor finishes. So of course you can always separate your work quite well, that have the beds and the backings, and then you now have the final finish, top of the final finishing of the floor, as it's shown there. So that being said, so for instance, you now have the final finishing. You can have it as a tile, or you can have it as any other item that you'd wish, any different type of tile. You explain size and so on. The unit is what you stick to, is square meters, as we've covered in this case. So let's see what comes next after the floor, and that should be none other than walls. So we go to walls. Also walls, you can have your plastering, and then you have your painting. Okay, so when you have those two options, when you have those two items, then what comes is for you to now be able to interpret your drawing, and then be able to get those areas. But then generally you do it in square meters, and in fact it's the same, the walls and the ceiling. So let's see an example of that from from our work here. So this is ground floor, then the walls finishes. So yeah, you can always separate them into external finishes and also internal finishes. Okay, so we start with the external finishes. You describe whatever is happening on the wall. Then for the internal finishes is now where we have the floor finishes, the internal wall finishes, the ceiling finishes. Okay, all right. So yeah, generally that is what you need to take care of. You have to make sure that you have your work separated in regard to the location, especially for the finishes. So you can notice here that we have this is element 09. Element 09 is talking about external finishes. So under external finishes, do any other item that is any other finishes that is concerned with the external locations of the house. Once that is done, then you now go to internal finishes. So any other item that has been explained in terms of the unit remains the same, except that you need to separate your work in terms of the locations. So let's see what else we have. What else do we have? Alright, let's see. Staircases we've done, so we go to, yeah, this is still about the floor, the dividing strips, when for instance you're using terrazzo and so on. So in that case, also in linear meters, skirtings also in linear meters. So molding and cornices, architraves, molding, ceiling ribs, and so on, those are done in linear meters. So that is what is presented there. So you'll be able to see when you go to ceiling. Ceiling is basically very straightforward. Talk about the brandering. That is now what receives the either the gypsum ceiling board or cement plaster board. Talk about that area. Just measure the area. Okay. Then now the next thing that you do is to get the length for the cornice. It's very straightforward as it sounds. So there is no much complicating it. It's just done straight on, as we've discussed in that given instance. So this is also dividing strip, and we've seen that. Beds and backings, that is what we've talked about in terms of the floor finishes. Okay, so those are now the main areas that I would deem fit for the discussion in this particular session, because I told you there are quite a number of items, and we will not be able to cover each and every one of them for this particular session. So We've discussed generally finishes. We've also discussed now the categorization of those finishes. You do them in according to location. You can say talk about externally, do ground floor, do first floor, second floor, and so on and so forth. After that, after you've categorized them that way, then you now talk about external wall finishes, internal the wall finishes, floor finishes, wall finishes, ceiling finishes. Then that makes it complete. Yeah, so for our presentation today, we just like us to finalize what we've covered, just to summarize. So we've covered 3 sections. Okay, first section we've covered today is on the mechanical installations, and we've said that generally they're done in numbers, enumerated. Okay, of course describing the parts and so on. Then we've covered also electrical installations. For electrical installations, we've covered just a summary of the items, basically generally done also in the numbers. But then lastly we've covered the finishes. So for the finishes, generally done in square meters, including the floor, wall, and also the ceiling. Before I forget, you also need to do it net. For example, if it's walling, that area should be net, implying that you need to deduct items that are not making up the wall, including the openings. Okay, so in that case you have all the sections that we've covered today, right? And I believe you enjoyed the session and it was worthwhile while you watched. Thank you so much for watching this video. I would urge you that you please make a subscription so that we keep growing, you keep getting this content, because very soon the one that is coming next is now the actual measurements of these items from the drawings, which will be even more and more intriguing. Thank you so much. Have a blessed time, and please make a subscription. Bye bye.